Hi, everyone. Welcome to the IPSAS staff review of IPSAS 46 measurement and updates to Chapter 7 of the Conceptual Framework measurement. Ross and I thought this would be a really good opportunity to discuss and give you highlights related to these projects because the IPSAS really reached a key milestone as it relates to the measurement project in general. So what Ross and I will try to give you today in our presentation or our short discussion here is the key takeaways from these projects and try to provide some insight into what the board was thinking when they were developing these projects. So Ross, why don't you kick us off and take us away?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Actually, I can remember when this project started. I think it was around June 2015 where the board actually approved the measurement project brief. And, we've come a long way and covered a lot of ground over that time in developing this project. But maybe start us off by taking us through some of the key takeaways or key pieces of guidance that's been added through this measurement project.
Well, Ross, you started me off with a softball question because whenever we go out and talk about this, IPSAS 46 and Chapter 7 specifically, I always go back to three key things. One, IPSAS 46 specifically is a one-stop shop for measurement. And I really hope that hits home with our stakeholders because it's really supposed to be helpful in that regard. Second is the introduction of fair value. And then number three is the introduction, and this is where the board spent a lot of time, of a public sector specific measurement basis.
Interesting. One-stop shop for measurement sounds like quite an innovation compared to the current IPSAS. Can you speak a little bit more about that and kind of describe what you mean?
Yeah, so you really have to go back to the beginning of this project and why it started. And if I go back to 2014 when the conceptual framework was finalized, what the IPSAS noticed at the time was there wasn't great alignment between the conceptual framework measurement chapter and the rest of IPSAS. So the measurement project was really kicked off for that reason, to help with alignment there and bring the guidance together. And that's really, at the end, what IPSAS 46 ended up with. What the IPSAS really focused on was, I would say, consolidating measurement guidance across IPSAS and bringing it all into one standard. I think one of the best examples of this is a project that was, or a standard that was associated with this project, and that's property, plant, and equipment, IPSAS 45. And prior to the IPSAS 46 measurement being finalized, the way our IPSAS worked is they would provide recognition and measurement guidance. And within that measurement guidance, you'd have guidance on what measurement basis to apply, and when you've selected your measurement basis, how to actually apply that in practice. So PP&E is a good example. Old PP&E, the previous PP&E standard, would allow you to use fair value or cost. But in that old guidance, it would also tell you what assumptions to use when you're using fair value and what to consider when you're building up your cost. What IPSAS 46 does is it goes across all of the IPSAS or the entire IPSAS suite of standards and consolidates or pulls that guidance into IPSAS 46. So now when you go to the new PP&E standard, IPSAS 45, what you'll see is you still have the ability to select between fair value and cost, but the assumptions that are required to apply that guidance now sit in IPSAS 46, which is why we call it a one-stop shop for measurement.
Great. Well, that sounds like quite a good improvement to the usability of the guidance that hopefully the users of the standard will find helpful in consolidating the measurement guidance in that way. Another point you touched on that I want to talk a little bit more about is fair value. So I was a little confused by that one because clearly we already have fair value guidance throughout the IPSAS in various places. But what have you done around fair value, and why did you need to do that?
So the big reason we need to do that was, and this goes back to the whole genesis of the project, the previous conceptual framework didn't identify fair value as a measurement basis that could be applied in the IPSAS suite of standards. But to your point, Ross, fair value existed in our old PP&E standard, it existed in financial instruments, and it was largely aligned with the private sector guidance at the time, but we just hadn't made that link yet. And what really drove this home was a few years ago in our financial instruments project, the IPSAS really looked at those transactions that were in scope of financial instruments and evaluated whether the existing private sector fair value guidance applied. And they decided that the transactions were the same and there was no public sector reason to depart. And they felt that the most useful information, the most useful measurement information to users was that fair value guidance that existed in IFRS 13. So that's really why the IPSAS brought in that guidance for those transactions to which it really applies and provides users with useful measurement information.
I see. That makes a lot of sense now, and thanks for clarifying that for me. The other one you talked about, maybe the most intriguing of your three takeaways, is this public sector measurement guidance you talked about, and that sounds more like a major change, introduction into the IPSAS guidance. Could you maybe just speak a little bit more about that? I'm sure the viewers would be interested to know a little bit more background on that one.
Well, I think to provide some insight here, you have to go back to fair value, because as part of the consultation paper, as part of the exposure draft, we asked our constituents whether fair value was appropriate to bring into our literature. And resoundingly, overwhelmingly, our stakeholders said, yes, you need to include this. Where there's no difference between the public sector and the private sector on measurement, this is an appropriate measurement basis. But as well to that overwhelming support, I'd say we had the same overwhelming responses indicating that we also need a public sector measurement basis. We heard that fair value makes a lot of sense for assets held for their financial capacity, where you're holding the asset to generate cash flows. But in the public sector, that's not what the majority of assets are held for. They're held to provide services. So hospitals, schools, those types of assets. And the message we heard from stakeholders was fair value and the volatility that might be associated with fair value isn't providing users with relevant information. So the IPSAS spent a lot of time developing this public sector specific measurement basis, which we called current operational value. And again, staying really high level, if I was really to identify the key takeaway, what I'd want listeners to hear is the big difference between fair value and current operational value is fair value really focuses on highest and best use and the amount you could receive to sell an asset, whereas current operational value measures the asset based on its current use. And that's important because the highest and best use of a school, or the value you could sell that building for, might be different than the value of that school in its current use, or the value that an entity or public sector entity would pay to replace the service potential associated with that asset. And that's, I don't know, you said this when we were just talking here, but it really is the key difference and a key output of this project, because it's really a public sector difference that the IPSAS be addressed.
Great, Dave. The public sector measurement guidance being added through IPSAS 46 really does sound like an important innovation for public sector users of the standard that will introduce a current value measurement basis that allows an entity to recognize and measure its assets in a way that provides information on the service, to cost the services being delivered by using those assets. The effective date of IPSAS 46 is January 1st, 2025, and the changes to the measurement conceptual framework chapter are applicable when issued. Is there anything else, Dave, you want to mention about this new guidance to our viewers today?
I guess two things come to mind, Ross. The first is we treated this as a measurement suite of projects, and you and I talked about the conceptual framework updates today and IPSAS 46, but also included in this suite was IPSAS 45, property, plant, and equipment. And the reason that was included in this suite of projects is the IPSASB took the time during the development of measurement to apply current operational value, the public sector measurement basis, in property, plant, and equipment. So that's also effective on January 1st, 2025, and COV has been fully implemented in there. The second point is tied to that. Even though the IPSASB's applied current operational value to property, plant, and equipment, the second phase of this project, or the application phase, is going to take place during 2023. And that's where the IPSASB is going to consider the applicability of current operational value across the rest of the suite of IPSAS. Great,
Dave. Thanks. Well, that wraps us up for today. Thanks to all our viewers for joining us for our discussion today. You can find more on these new pronouncements on the IPSASB website, and they'll be accompanied with other support material to help you in understanding this new guidance and implementing it. I want to thank all our viewers for joining us today. Have a great day.